The true power of your life awakens when you recognize that you are greater than your circumstances. This book is a guide to transforming your reality based on the ideologies of Wallace D. Wattles. Here, every word is an invitation to break limiting beliefs and embrace the infinite power that lies within you. Wattles proposes a vision of life that does not focus solely on material success, but on a deep connection with universal abundance and purpose. The science of fullness focuses on applying Wattles' principles to transcend scarcity, connect with the source of life, and manifest a full and purposeful existence. Each chapter invites you to question your beliefs, awaken your creative power, and live in harmony with universal laws. This book, inspired by Wattles' teachings, offers a clear and direct path toward inner transformation and the conscious creation of your life. The awakening of consciousness, the awakening of inner potential. Looking out at the vast landscape of my life, there was a moment that marked a before and after. One ordinary day, under the weight of daily worries, I asked myself a simple but devastating question. Am I living up to my full potential, or am I just existing? For years, my life felt like a succession of gray days, an inertia of routines, and duties that kept me from something I knew deep down I was meant to be. This question, which arose almost in a whisper, opened a crack in my consciousness, and through it, a light began to filter in. What does it mean to awaken your potential? I asked myself over and over again as I walked the streets, observing people with their gazes lost in their own fears. The awakening, I realized, is not a sudden event or a glorious epiphany. It is a silent and constant process, like a river that slowly changes its course to seek new waters. It is at this point that I want to share a reflection. Every human being has a latent power within them, a seed waiting to bloom. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a tangible truth. However, it is our responsibility to recognize and nourish that seed, to give it space and light. How can I know if I have awakened my potential? That was one of the first questions I asked myself, and one that many people around me also asked. The answer is revealed in simple moments, in flashes of clarity. It is that feeling of peace in the midst of chaos, that feeling of satisfaction when you give without expecting to receive, that calm when you make a difficult decision and know deep in your being that it is the right thing to do. However, the awakening is not an external experience. You will not find it in the praise of others or in the amount of possessions you manage to accumulate. Your true potential awakens when you align yourself with a greater consciousness, when you realize that you are not alone in your internal struggle, but are part of an immense force, of a universal intelligence that desires the best for you. How can I align myself with that consciousness? I asked myself over and over, searching in books and speeches and realizing that the answer was always within me. The process of alignment, I discovered, begins with the courage to understand ourselves, beyond our self-imposed limitations. I remember a clear moment on my path when I decided to dedicate myself to meditation every morning, not to reach an elevated state, but simply to listen to myself. It was in that silence that I found the clearest answers that didn't come with words but with sensations. It was there that I understood that the key to awakening is not doing but being. The awakening is not about becoming someone, but about shedding the layers that keep you from who you really are. What are those layers, you might ask? They are the limiting beliefs, the learned fears, the imposed concepts of success. These layers weigh on our true essence, suffocating our potential. It is necessary to observe them and let them go, one by one, with patience and self-love. Why do so many people never awaken to their true potential? I asked myself this daily as I walked through the city, observing tired faces and vacant stares. Awakening requires courage, not to face the world but to face yourself. It is an act of self-love, of telling yourself that you deserve to live fully. One night, while reflecting on this truth, I stood in front of a mirror. and, for the first time, looked beyond my reflection. I saw myself not as I was in that moment, but as the being I had always dreamed of being, free, at peace, full of life and purpose. I realized that it was not about becoming that person, but about allowing myself to awaken to her. And what happens when you awaken your potential, you may ask? It's not that problems disappear or that circumstances stop being challenging. The change happens within you. Your perception is transformed. You stop seeing difficulties as barriers and begin to experience them as opportunities to grow. You begin to realize that your life is an extension of the whole, that what you do for yourself, you also do for the world. The awakening of inner potential is not a linear path. It is a journey of self-discovery that can take you to corners of your soul you have never explored. What's the next step, you might ask at the end of this chapter? The answer, although simple, is profound. The next step is to open yourself to the possibility that there is more to you than you have allowed yourself to see. Every new day is an invitation to discover it, to recognize that there are no limits to what you can be if you allow yourself to awaken. This is only the beginning of our journey together. In the following chapters, we will delve into how to connect with that universal consciousness, how to transcend the beliefs that limit us, and how to live from a perspective of love, abundance, and purpose. Beyond the limits, connecting with the universal source. For a long time, I lived with the feeling that there was something beyond my limits, a lost connection with a greater force, something that seemed like the distant echo of an ancient call. It was as if life, in its simplicity and complexity, invited me to see beyond the surface, to perceive a reality that my eyes could not fully grasp. What does it mean to go beyond our limits? I often asked myself while the noise of the world distracted me with its demands. It was a disquieting question that did not arise from the logical mind, but from the heart, because deep in my being, I knew that these limits were not real, but self-imposed. They were beliefs, stories told and retold not only by others, but also by myself. I remember a specific day when everything changed. I was sitting on the edge of a lake in silence, watching the small waves gently break against the shore. It was in that silence that I heard something more than the sound of the water, a certainty deep in my being. There were no words to explain, it only a sudden and clear understanding. The limits I thought I had were nothing more than illusions. What is the universal source, you might ask, and rightly so, because it is not a physical place or a point in space. The universal source is that intelligence that connects everything that exists, the origin of all thought, of all life. It is the river of which each of us is a tributary, and to recognize it is to open ourselves to an infinite power that has always been available to us. And how can we connect with that source? It is a question that many people ask, including me back then. It is not a matter of effort or of reaching for something outside of us. It is an act of surrender, of allowing ourselves to be part of that vastness, because the universal source is not out there somewhere distant. It lives within each of us, waiting to be rediscovered. That day by the lake, when I closed my eyes and stopped trying to understand everything, I simply felt. I felt that the water, the wind, and the ground beneath my feet were not separate entities from me, but expressions of the same energy that ran through my veins. It was an instant of clarity so profound that it became a point of no return. I could never see life the same way again. What happens when we connect with the source is a question that may be on your mind, and the answer is subtle, almost ineffable. It is not a sudden flash or an overwhelming revelation, but a gradual change, like the dawn that slowly dissipates the darkness. The connection with the source brings a feeling of deep peace, an understanding that we are in the right place, doing the right thing, at the right time. That connection, I realized, is not achieved through magic formulas or complicated rituals. It is about letting go of our expectations and trusting that even if we don't see the full picture, there is an intelligence that directs everything. How can I trust that intelligence? You might ask. Trust, I discovered, is born of faith. Not blind faith, but a living and conscious faith. The kind that arises when you look around and realize that every tree, every star, and every living being is a manifestation of that same energy. On my journey, there were moments of doubt, as there are on every spiritual journey. There were days when difficulties seemed insurmountable, when limits seemed very real. But always, in the midst of those internal storms, there was a glimmer of light that reminded me of my connection to the source. What role do difficulties play in this process? Someone once asked me. The answer became clear over time. Difficulties are like waves in the ocean of life. They are not there to drown us, but to teach us to flow, to remember that we are not the waves but the ocean itself. Every limit, every obstacle is an invitation to look within and recognize the strength that lies in our spirit. Connecting with the source is embracing unity, understanding that separation is an illusion. What does unity mean, you might ask? Unity is not the denial of our differences, but the recognition that all of them are part of the same whole. It is the certainty that deep in our being we are all connected, and that what we do for ourselves, we do for others. By understanding this, I began to see life with new eyes. The people I once saw as strangers, I now saw as reflections of myself. The situations I once perceived as obstacles, I now understood as opportunities for growth. And in that change of perception, I realized that life was not something that happened to me, but something that I created together with the source. And what is the purpose of connecting with the universal source? You might ask at the end of this chapter. The purpose is simple but profound. To live in harmony with life itself, to be a channel for the energy of love and creation. It is allowing the source to express itself through us, not for our own benefit, but for the well-being of all. In the following chapters, we will explore how to transcend the beliefs that have limited us, how to live from a perspective of abundance, and how to find our purpose in the vast fabric of existence. Because in the end, beyond the limits, there is a world of infinite possibilities waiting to be discovered by each of us. And that discovery, believe me, is the greatest thing you can do for yourself and for the world. Because by connecting with the universal source, you connect with everything that is, with everything that has been, and with everything that can. Be the science of the mind, creating a reality of abundance, on. One of those nights when sleep seemed elusive, I found myself watching the starry sky from the window. It was no different from so many other nights. But this time, seeing the immensity of the stars, a question arose that forever changed the way I understood life. Is it possible that the same power that moves the stars lives in me? That idea accompanied me like a persistent whisper. I wondered if it was possible that my mind could connect with the intelligence that moves the planets, with that force that gives life to every being and sustains every corner of the universe. It was a radical thought, one that questioned the beliefs I had held all my life. What is the mind? I asked myself in silence. The mind, I understood, is not just the seat of thoughts, but the vehicle by which we access an infinite power. It is not simply the space where we process information, but a channel to connect with the creative essence of the universe. The mind, I discovered, is the bridge between what we see and what we can become. As I delved into this idea, I realized that just as a river flows following its course, the mind can flow toward abundance if we allow it. But first, we must recognize our ability to direct its current. How can I direct my mind toward abundance? It's a question I asked myself, and one that many others have also asked. The first step, I discovered, is to believe in the possibility. At some point in our lives, many of us have been conditioned to accept scarcity as an inevitable reality. Scarcity of time, of love, of resources. And so, we create invisible walls around us, walls that limit our potential. But those walls are not real. They are the result of a mind that has been programmed to see the limited instead of the infinite. I remember a clear moment in my life, a turning point. It was on an apparently ordinary day, while I was walking through a park full of lush trees. I observed the leaves and flowers that grew in abundance, without effort or struggle, simply being what they were meant to be. And I realized that nature knows no scarcity. Everything in it exists in abundance, from the dewdrops on the leaves to the stars in the sky. Why do human beings experience scarcity? I asked myself. The answer hit me with the force of an obvious truth. Scarcity does not exist in the universe. It is a creation of the human mind. It is a reflection of our beliefs, of the way we interpret the world. If we observe nature and ourselves, we discover that the only obstacle to that abundance is our way of thinking. So, how can I create a reality of abundance, you might ask? The key, I discovered, is to understand that the mind is not just a tool for navigating the world, but an active creator of our reality. The way we think determines the way we experience life, and by changing the way we think, we can transform our experience. For me, the transformation began with a simple decision: to choose to see life from the perspective of abundance. It was not an immediate change, but a daily process of retraining my mind. Every time a thought of scarcity arose, whether it was worry about money, fear of the future, or insecurity about my worth, I would stop, observe it, and consciously choose to replace it with an affirmation of abundance. What affirmations can you make? You can ask yourself. Affirmations are like seeds that we plant in the garden of our mind. Some of the affirmations that helped me were simple but powerful. I am one with the infinite wealth of the all. Everything I need manifests in my life at the perfect time. I am in tune with the abundance of creation. I remember one day in particular when doubt hit hard. I was facing a difficult economic situation, and my mind was overflowing with thoughts of fear. But in that moment, I held on to my affirmations, and something changed inside me. I began to see opportunities I had not perceived before, to find solutions where I had only seen problems. It was as if a new reality unfolded before my eyes, simply because I had decided to believe in abundance. How do I know if I'm creating a reality of abundance? Is a question I asked myself in my process. The answer is not found in immediate results, but in the feeling of peace that arises in the midst of uncertainty, in the confidence that everything is in its place, and that what you need will come to you. When you choose to see abundance in every moment, you begin to notice that life supports you in mysterious but profound ways. The science of the mind is not about a trick or a technique to get what you want. It is a change of consciousness, a way of living that recognizes that the power that moves the stars also lives in you. It is understanding that by aligning yourself with that power, you become a channel for the creation of a reality full of possibilities. And what is the purpose of creating a reality of abundance? You might ask at the end of this chapter. The purpose is not to accumulate material wealth or gain power over others. The true purpose is to live in harmony with the flow of life, to be a reflection of the abundance of the universe, and to share that abundance with those around you. In the following chapters, we will explore how to transcend the limiting beliefs that keep us tied to scarcity, how to find our purpose in the vast fabric of existence, and how to live from a perspective of love and connection. Because in the end, creating a reality of abundance is not just a personal act, but a gift to the world. Because when you change, the world changes with you. And believe me, creating a reality of abundance is one of the most powerful acts you can do, not only for yourself, but for all those around you. Love and consciousness. Unification with the whole. There comes a time in life when you ask yourself, what is love really? It is a question that arises not from a need to understand, but from a deep longing to feel whole, to experience that connection that transcends words and actions. I also asked myself this, sitting in a silent room when the lights went out, and all that was left was the company of my own breathing. "What is love?" I repeated in a whisper, as if I expected the echo of that question to reveal the truth. Over time, I discovered that love is much more than a fleeting feeling or an intense emotion. It is the pure consciousness of our unity with everything that exists. I remember one morning when, after days of questions, I went for a walk with no destination. There was something restless in my heart, something I could not understand. It was then that, observing a tree blooming in the park, I saw something beyond its leaves and flowers. I saw life, a life that extended from the deepest root to the highest leaf, and I knew that the same life also ran within me. In that instant, I understood that love is not something that happens between two people. It is the fabric that connects everything that exists. How can we unify with the whole? It is a question that not only I asked, but that I heard from many people along the way. Unification is not an external achievement or an unattainable ideal. It is an inner awakening, an understanding that we have never been separate from the whole. Love is the consciousness of that unity, the recognition that what I do for myself, I do for you, and what I do for you, I do for me. How can I cultivate that love and that consciousness? I asked myself over and over while looking for answers in books, in teachers, and in myself. The answer became clear through the small things. Consciousness is cultivated with every moment of mindfulness, with every act of kindness, and with every time we choose to see the other not as a stranger but as an extension of ourselves. I remember one day in particular, while walking down a busy street, observing people passing by with their gazes lost in their own worries. In that sea of unknown faces, I wondered if they also felt lonely in the midst of so many people, if they also longed for a love that went beyond what they could see or touch. It was in that moment that I understood that love begins when we stop seeing ourselves as isolated individuals and begin to recognize ourselves as part of a larger whole. How do I know if I'm living in unity with the whole? I constantly asked myself as I tried to bring this understanding into my daily life. Unity feels like a deep peace, like an acceptance of every experience, good or bad, as part of a greater purpose. It is not an escape from reality, but a complete immersion in it, an embrace of every moment just as it is. Love and consciousness are deeply intertwined. When we truly love, we become conscious of our unity. And when we are conscious of that unity, we cannot help but love. And how can I love in that way? You might ask. Love of this nature is not reached through effort, but through letting go. It is a love that flows when we stop judging, when we let go of fear, and when we allow ourselves to see ourselves reflected in others. One afternoon, while contemplating a sunset, I felt a deep gratitude for the simplicity of the moment. I realized that love does not need to be grandiose or dramatic. It is enough to be present, to be conscious of the life that breathes in everything. And by being conscious of that life, I saw myself as part of it, as a note in the symphony of the universe. What prevents us from living in love and unity? It's a question I asked myself, and one that may also resonate with you. The answer is hidden in our beliefs of separation, in the idea that we are fragmented beings in a divided world. But the truth is that love has always been present, waiting for us to open the eyes of our soul to recognize it. And what is the purpose of unifying with the whole? You might ask at the end of this chapter. The purpose, I discovered, is not to reach some kind of elevated or enlightened state, but to live in full harmony with life itself. By unifying with the whole, we free ourselves from the need to control and from the illusion of separation. We become channels for the expression of love in its purest form, allowing it to flow through us and into everything. Love and consciousness are the two sides of the same coin, a coin that reminds us that true abundance does not reside in what we possess, but in our capacity to give without expecting to receive, because what we give to the world, we are actually giving to ourselves. In the following chapters, we will explore how to transcend the beliefs of separation, how to live from a perspective of compassion and connection, and how to find our purpose in the vast fabric of existence. Because in the end, living in love and consciousness is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and the world. The failure of selfishness. Reflections on the common good. There comes a moment in life when you realize that the path you have been following has not led you anywhere meaningful. I call it the failure of selfishness, and I recognize it because I have lived it. For years, I strived to achieve my own goals, convinced that happiness and satisfaction were at the end of that solitary path. But one day, upon achieving what I thought was success, I found myself more empty than ever. Why, if I have everything, do I feel so incomplete? I asked myself, looking at the life I had built around me, full of material achievements but empty of meaning. It didn't take me long to realize that selfishness, that blind pursuit of personal satisfaction, could not sustain itself. It was like trying to fill a jar with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it will always be empty. Selfishness fails because it isolates us from others. It makes us believe that we are separate, that our well-being depends on what we can accumulate, protect, or control. What happens when we live only for ourselves, you might ask? The answer is clear. We disconnect from the flow of life, from the true abundance that can only be experienced when we open ourselves to the common good. I remember a key moment in my life. I was sitting on a park bench, watching people walk by in a hurry, as if each one were in their own world. I felt a disconnection not only between them but also with myself. I realized that by focusing solely on my well-being, I had stopped seeing others, stopped understanding that my actions did not just affect me, but affected everyone around me. Why doesn't selfishness lead to true happiness? I asked myself. Because selfishness is like a shadow that covers our spirit. No matter how much we try to feed it, it will always be hungry. Genuine well-being arises from the understanding that our lives are intertwined, that what we do for others, we are actually doing for ourselves. One afternoon, after reflecting on this for a long time, I decided to change the direction of my life. I would no longer seek happiness in the satisfaction of my personal desires, but in service to the common good. What does it mean to serve the common good, you might ask? Service to the common good is not a grandiose action or a heroic sacrifice. It is a way of living, a change of consciousness that leads us to see ourselves in others. Little by little, I began to change my daily habits. Instead of asking myself how I could get the most out of every situation for myself, I began to ask myself how I could contribute to the well-being of everyone involved. How did my life change when I stopped thinking only about myself? You may ask. The change was profound. I discovered that by giving more of myself, by caring about others, my own life was filled with a satisfaction that I had never experienced before. How can I know if I'm living for the common good? It is a question I ask myself many times. The answer is not in grand gestures, but in the small daily decisions. Am I acting from love and compassion, or from fear and the need for control? Am I seeking the well-being of others as much as my own? By changing my perspective, by seeing others as part of my same life experience, I began to feel a deep connection with the world that had previously been alien to me. The failure of selfishness is not the end, but the beginning of a new way of living. It is the recognition that true fullness is found in cooperation, in union, in the understanding that we are all in the same boat. And what happens when we live for the common good? You might ask. What happens is something beautiful. Life begins to flow naturally. You no longer fight against the current because now you are part of it. I remember one day in particular when I helped someone I didn't know. It wasn't a big gesture, just an act of kindness. When I saw the smile on that person's face, I felt a peace I had not known before. In that moment, I understood that the common good is not a distant or unattainable ideal. It is something that is built every day with every action, with every decision we make to make this world a little better for everyone. What role does love play in all of this? You might ask at the end of this chapter. Love is the force that moves the common good. It is what drives us to see beyond our immediate needs and to recognize that true well-being can only exist when we share it with others. It is a love that asks for nothing in return, because in the act of giving, we have already received. In the following chapters, we will explore how we can live from this perspective of love and unity, how we can transcend selfishness and build a life based on connection with others. Because in the end, the failure of selfishness is only the first step toward a life full of meaning, a life in which the well-being of one is the well-being of all. Abundance in nature. The lesson of the birds one day. While walking along a path lined with tall trees, I heard the chirping of a group of birds. I stopped and watched as they moved from one branch to another, carefree and free, living each moment without the shadow of fear. I asked myself, what do these small creatures know that I don't? It was then that I understood that in nature, there is a silent wisdom, a lesson that is there waiting to be discovered by those who dare to listen. What can nature teach us about abundance? I asked myself in a quiet voice, hoping to find an answer in the simplicity of the moment. Birds don't worry about tomorrow. They don't plan how they'll get their next meal or where they'll sleep. They don't have a warehouse where they store their provisions or a market where they buy what they need. And yet, they lack nothing. Every day, they receive what they need, trusting completely in the flow of life. That idea resonated deeply with me. I realized that while I lived trapped in anxiety about the future and the fear of scarcity, birds lived in a state of perfect abundance. What does it mean to live in abundance? I asked myself. Living in abundance is not about having more than necessary, but about trusting that there will always be enough. Nature knows no lack because it is connected to an inexhaustible source of life and sustenance. I remember a specific day while I was watching a bird collect small pieces of leaves and branches to build its nest. It did so with absolute calm, without haste, as if it knew that everything it needed was available to it. In that moment, I understood that true abundance is not about accumulating, but about flowing with life, trusting that everything will come in its own time and in the right measure. Why do human beings experience scarcity? I constantly ask myself. The answer, I discovered, lies in our belief that we are separated from the whole, that we must fight to get what we need. But nature doesn't fight. Nature simply is. Scarcity is a construct of the human mind, a consequence of our disconnection from the life that surrounds us. How can we learn from the birds, you might ask? The lesson of the birds is not about imitating their behavior, but about adopting their perspective. They don't worry about the future because they live fully in the present, trusting that life itself will provide what is necessary. In every chirp, in every flight, there is a reminder that abundance is our natural state if we just allow it to flow through us. During my daily walks, I began to pay more attention to nature. I observed how every being, from the smallest ant to the most imposing tree, exists in harmony with its environment, without worrying about what is to come. How can we live in harmony with life? I asked myself as I reflected on this. The answer came with unexpected clarity. We must let go of fear and embrace trust. And how do you let go of fear you might ask as you read these words. Letting go of fear is not an easy task, but it begins with a decision. The decision to trust that the universe is abundant and that we are part of that abundance. It is choosing to see life from the perspective of sufficiency instead of lack. I remember one day in particular when I decided to stop worrying about what I couldn't control. It was an act of faith, a leap into the unknown. By doing so, something changed inside me. I began to see opportunities where I had only seen obstacles before and to feel a deep gratitude for what I already had. I discovered that abundance is not an external condition, but an internal state. And what happens when we live in abundance, you might wonder? What happens is that life begins to flow naturally. Opportunities arrive not as a result of excessive effort, but as the natural consequence of being in tune with the rhythm of life. When we stop worrying about what we don't have and start being grateful for what we already possess, abundance manifests in unexpected ways. Birds don't compare themselves to each other. They don't compete for a piece of the sky or worry about the flight of another. Each one follows its own path, trusting in its ability to fly. Why do we human beings compare ourselves? I asked myself. Comparison is the root of scarcity because it makes us believe that what we have is not enough. But nature teaches us that every being has a unique purpose and that we are all connected in this vast web of life. In the following chapters, we will explore how to transcend beliefs of comparison and competition, how to live from a perspective of trust, and how to find our purpose in the great fabric of existence. Because in the end, the lesson of the birds is not just a metaphor, but an invitation to remember that true abundance does not reside in what we possess, but in the certainty that there is always enough for everyone. Divine purpose. Finding our place in the cosmos on. Some nights, the starry sky extends like an infinite cloak, and in that vast tapestry of lights, I can't help but feel small, like a particle floating in the vast ocean of the cosmos. It was on one of those nights, looking up at the stars, that a question arose within me that I had long avoided facing. What is my place in all this? How do I find my purpose? I asked myself over and over, as if the stars could give me back the answer. And although there were no words at that moment, there was a feeling, a subtle whisper within me that invited me to explore beyond the visible. I realized that finding our purpose is not an external task, but a process of deep listening and connection with the divine. I remember a key moment in my life when I decided to stop looking for my purpose in the things I could achieve or accumulate. It was a turning point, a decision to stop chasing external achievements and start looking within myself. How can I know what my purpose is? I asked myself in silence, with a mixture of fear and hope. It was then that I understood that my purpose was not found in doing, but in being. Divine purpose, I discovered, is not a goal we reach or a destination we arrive at. It is a way of living, a way of being present and acting in harmony with the universal intelligence. It is recognizing that each of us has a unique role in this vast work of creation. How do I know what my role is, you might ask? The answer is not revealed through effort or logic, but through intuition and faith. One morning, while walking on a solitary path, I saw a small river flowing gently. It didn't worry about reaching the sea or fight against the rocks it found in its way. It simply flowed, trusting that the current would take it exactly where it was meant to be. In that moment, I understood that purpose is not something you fight to achieve, but something you allow to be revealed. Why do we feel lost sometimes? I constantly asked myself. The feeling of being lost, I understood, arises when we disconnect from the divine intelligence, when we try to force the course of our lives instead of trusting in its natural flow. Life, like the river, has a purpose, a destination, and we are part of its current. How can we find our place in the cosmos? It is a profound question, and the answer is often simpler than we imagine. We find our place when we stop trying to control everything and open ourselves to the idea that there is a larger plan that we are a part of. It is about stopping the fight against circumstances and learning to flow with them, knowing that every experience, good or bad, is leading us toward our purpose. In a moment of deep reflection, I realized that my purpose was not just for me, but for all those with whom I share this journey. What does it mean to live with purpose? I asked myself. Living with purpose is to serve something greater than oneself. It is understanding that our actions not only affect our lives, but also the lives of others. It is seeing ourselves as instruments of universal intelligence, as channels through which love, abundance, and peace can manifest in the world. And how do I know if I am living my purpose, you might ask? The clearest sign that you are living your purpose is a feeling of peace, a certainty that you are in the right place, doing what you are meant to do. No matter how challenging the circumstances, when you live with purpose, you know that every experience has a meaning and a value. I remember one day in particular when I felt a deep connection with the universe. I was in the middle of a forest, surrounded by tall trees that reached up to the sky. In that majestic silence, I heard not only the whisper of the wind, but also the beating of my own heart. It was as if everything was in perfect harmony, and in that moment, I understood that. My purpose was not to be something special, but to be myself completely. What happens when we find our purpose? It is a natural question, and the answer is revealed in the transformation of our perspective. You stop seeing life as a series of tasks to be completed and begin to experience it as an adventure in which every day is a new opportunity to be an expression of the divine. You stop worrying about what you can't control and focus on what you can offer the world. Divine purpose is not about greatness or success, but about authenticity and connection. It is allowing your life to be a reflection of the intelligence that guides the stars and makes the flowers bloom. It is finding peace in the fact that you don't need to be someone else because you are already part of something much bigger than you can imagine. In the following chapters, we will explore how to live in alignment with that purpose, how to transcend the doubts that keep us from our path, and how to find meaning in every experience, no matter how small it may seem. Because in the end, finding our place in the cosmos is remembering that we have always been a part of it, that each of us has a unique and valuable role to play in this great work. The power of will, how to connect with the supreme power. There was a moment in my life when I felt like a leaf at the mercy of the wind, being dragged from one side to another by circumstances, with no clear direction. It was as if life happened without my consent, and I was just reacting to every change without truly being the author of my destiny. It was then that I asked myself, is there a force within me capable of changing everything? What is will? I asked myself in silence, as if the answer could emerge from some corner of my soul. Will, I discovered, is not simply the desire or intention to do something. Will is the force that connects us with the supreme power, the channel through which divine energy flows through us. It is the key that opens the door to the life we are meant to live. I remember a specific day when I decided to put this inner force to the test. I was in the middle of a crossroads, facing a decision that seemed impossible to make. I felt fear, insecurity, and a deep desire to give in to doubt. But in that moment, I remembered a simple truth. The supreme power is not outside of me, but within me. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and suddenly I knew that I had the power to choose my own path. How can I connect my will with the supreme power? I constantly asked myself, looking for guidance in the midst of uncertainty. The answer, although simple, was transformative. We connect our will with the supreme power when we align our deepest desires with the will of the universe. It's not about imposing our desires on the world, but about allowing the universal intelligence to express itself through us. What does it mean to align our will, you might ask? Alignment is not achieved with force or control, but with surrender and trust. It is deciding that no matter what, you will choose to act from a place of love and truth instead of fear and doubt. It is understanding that by doing this, you become a channel for the manifestation of a power much greater than your own. One afternoon, while walking on a path covered with leaves, I stopped and observed how the branches of the trees bowed as the wind passed. They did not fight against it, but moved in harmony, following its natural course. In that moment, I understood. That will is not a matter of resistance, but of collaboration. It is learning to move with life instead of fighting against it. How can I know if I am using my will correctly? I asked myself. The answer was revealed in my own experience. When your will is aligned with the supreme power, you feel a deep peace, a certainty that you are on the right path. Even if you don't know all the details, you no longer need to force things to happen, because you understand that you are being guided by an intelligence greater than you. The power of will is not found in imposing oneself on the world, but in aligning oneself with the flow of life. And what happens when we align ourselves with that power? You may ask. What happens is an internal transformation. You begin to see difficulties as opportunities to exercise your inner strength, and every decision, no matter how small, becomes an act of conscious creation. I remember a moment when I faced a seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Everything around me told me to give up, to accept defeat. But instead of giving in, I decided to keep my will firm, trusting that the supreme power was supporting me. It was an act of faith, an affirmation of my connection with something greater, and what happened next was miraculous. Not only did I overcome the obstacle, but I discovered a strength within me that I had never imagined. How can we cultivate this willpower? It is a question I asked myself many times. Will is cultivated every day with every small decision to act from truth, even when it is difficult. It is choosing patience over impatience, compassion over anger, faith over doubt. It is remembering that every action we take has the power to bring us closer to our divine purpose. The power of will is not a constant struggle, but a conscious surrender to the power that guides us. And how do I know if I am surrendering to that power? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. You know it when you feel that despite the challenges, there is an unshakable peace in your heart. You know that you are connected with the supreme power when your actions do not arise from fear, but from love. In the following chapters, we will explore how to live from this willpower, how to transcend the fears that keep us from our truth, and how to allow the supreme power to manifest through every aspect of our lives. Because in the end, connecting with the supreme power is not an act of imposition, but of collaboration, a dance between our will and the will of the universe. The power of faith, the science of manifestation. In my search for answers, there was a moment when I found myself facing an overwhelming doubt. Is it possible to create a full life simply by trusting in something I can't see or touch? I asked myself this question while looking at the sky at dusk, watching as the darkness gave way to the stars. And I realized that even though I couldn't see the sun, I knew it was there, on the other side of the horizon, waiting to return. What is faith? I often asked myself. Faith, I discovered, is not just believing in something beyond reason. It is a science, a universal law that governs the manifestation of our experiences. Faith is the certainty that there is a power beyond the visible, a force that responds to our deepest intentions. It is the trust that even if we cannot see the whole path, every step we take is guided by that higher intelligence. I remember a specific day when everything around me seemed to be falling apart. Problems seemed to multiply, and my mind was filled with fear and uncertainty. It was then that I decided with all my being to put my faith to the test. It wasn't about waiting for circumstances to magically change, but about changing my perception of them. I decided to see my challenges not as barriers, but as opportunities to demonstrate the power of faith. How can I manifest what I desire through faith? I constantly asked myself. The key, I discovered, is not to ask with desperation, but to ask with certainty, like someone who has already received what they need. The science of manifestation does not consist of simply wishing for something, but of trusting completely that the universe has already responded to that request. Faith is not a fleeting thought. It is a state of being, an attitude of gratitude and trust. And how do I know if I have true faith, you might ask? True faith feels like a deep peace in the midst of the storm, like a certainty that needs no proof to exist. It is knowing that even if the current circumstances are not favorable, there is a universal intelligence that is orchestrating everything for your good. Faith does not demand guarantees. It just asks that you trust and move forward, even when you cannot see the next step. I remember a particular moment when, facing a difficult economic situation, I chose to act from faith instead of fear. I started each day by giving thanks, not only for what I already had, but for what was on its way. I visualized the solution to my problems and felt the gratitude as if it had already arrived. And although there were no immediate changes at first, over time, circumstances began to transform in ways I never would have imagined. What is the role of gratitude in manifestation? I asked myself. Gratitude is the final act of faith. It is the confirmation that we have already received what we need even before it physically manifests. It is the way of telling the universe, I trust that you are working in my favor. Gratitude aligns us with the vibration of abundance and opens the doors to receiving more than we have asked for. And what happens when we manifest from faith, you may ask? What happens is a change of perception. You begin to see opportunities instead of obstacles. You begin to act from a place of confidence instead of fear. It is not that life stops being challenging, but that you stop feeling powerless in the face of those challenges. Faith gives you the power to act, to move forward with certainty toward what you desire. On one occasion, while walking on a foggy path, I realized that even though I couldn't see the end of the road, I kept moving forward, trusting that each step would lead me to my destination. Faith, I thought, is exactly that. Taking one step after another, even when you can't see the end, trusting that the fog will dissipate over time. How can I strengthen my faith? I asked. Faith is strengthened with every act of trust, with every time you choose to act from certainty instead of doubt. It is like a muscle that grows with every test, with every moment in which you decide to believe despite the circumstances. Faith is not developed in moments of comfort, but in moments of uncertainty, when everything pushes you to give up. And what is the purpose of faith? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose of faith is not simply to manifest what you desire, but to connect with the supreme power that lives within you. It is an invitation to live from a perspective of trust and gratitude, to see life not as a series of obstacles to overcome, but as an opportunity to co-create with the universe. In the following chapters, we will explore how to live from this perspective of faith, how to use gratitude as a tool for manifestation, and how to allow the universal intelligence to guide every aspect of our lives. Because in the end, the power of faith is not about getting what you want, but about becoming the person you are meant to be. The consciousness of health, uniting with eternal life. In moments of silence, when the bustle of the world fades, and all that remains is the murmur of my own breath, I often ask myself, what does it really mean to be alive? Not just to breathe, move, think, but to live in the deepest and truest sense of the word. And in that quietness, I came to a powerful conclusion. Eternal life is not something that happens later, but something that is chosen here and now. What is the consciousness of health? I asked myself in a whisper as I watched nature bloom around me. The consciousness of health is much more than the absence of disease. It is a state of fullness, a deep connection with life itself. It is not simply keeping the body free of ailments, but recognizing that within every cell, in every heartbeat, the same vital energy flows that sustains the entire universe. I remember a particular day when my body felt tired and my spirit was down. I decided to go for a walk while the sun slowly rose over the horizon. I stopped next to a river. The water flowed constantly, clear and calm. In that moment, I understood that health is not something we should pursue or force. It is something we must allow to flow through us, like the river that follows its natural course. How can I unite with eternal life? I asked myself. Eternal life is not a distant destination we reach, but a state of consciousness in which we unite with life in its purest form. Eternity is not in a distant time, but in every present moment, and uniting with it means letting go of the fear of disease, the worry about the future, and the obsession with the past. It is living here and now, fully aware that every breath is a gift. And how can I live in the consciousness of health, you might ask? The key, I discovered, is not in avoiding disease or protecting ourselves from all evil, but in cultivating a peaceful mind and spirit. Health is the reflection of a mind in harmony with life, a mind that chooses gratitude over complaint, love over fear, and trust over doubt. One day, while contemplating a tree that had been felled by a storm, I noticed that new branches were beginning to sprout from its trunk. It was as if life refused to give up, as if the vital force made its way even in the midst of adversity. In that moment, I understood that health is not simply being free of problems, but having the ability to be reborn, to flourish again and again, regardless of the circumstances. Why do we fear disease? I asked myself. The fear of disease arises from the belief that we are separated from the source of life, that we are vulnerable and fragile. But the truth is that when we unite with eternal life, we realize that our essence is immortal and that what happens in the body cannot touch what we really are. True health is experienced when we remember our connection with the divine intelligence that sustains everything. How can we cultivate that connection? It is a question I asked myself many times. The connection with eternal life is cultivated every day through simple but profound acts. Gratitude for every moment, conscious breathing, the choice of thoughts of love and peace. It is allowing life to flow through us without resistance, trusting that we are sustained by a power greater than our understanding. I remember a particular moment when, facing an illness, I decided to stop fighting against my body and start listening to what it had to tell me. I discovered that the illness was not an enemy, but a messenger, a sign that something in my life was out of balance. By becoming aware of this, I stopped fearing my situation and began to be grateful for the opportunity to heal, not only physically, but in all aspects of my being. What does it really mean to heal? I asked myself. Healing is not simply restoring the body to its previous state, but elevating our entire being to a state of harmony with life. It is a process of liberation, of letting go of what no longer serves us and opening ourselves to new ways of living and being. Healing occurs when we choose to see every experience, even the painful ones, as an opportunity to grow and evolve. And what is the purpose of uniting with eternal life? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose of uniting with eternal life is not to escape death, but to transcend the fear of it. It is to live every moment with the certainty that we are part of something bigger, something that cannot be destroyed by time or circumstances. It is to experience the fullness of life in its purest and deepest form. In the following chapters, we will explore how to live from this consciousness of health, how to free the limiting beliefs that keep us in fear, and how to allow eternal life to express itself through every aspect of our existence. Because in the end, Uniting with eternal life is not an act of blind faith, but of deep connection with the truth of who we are. Cosmic wisdom, the art of acting in harmony with truth. In times of greatest uncertainty, I have looked up at the sky and felt small, like a particle floating in the vast ocean of the cosmos. And in the midst of that immensity, an inevitable question always arises. Is there a truth that guides all this? What is cosmic wisdom? I asked myself, searching for answers in what seemed infinite and unknown. Cosmic wisdom, I discovered, is more than the accumulated knowledge of the years or the information contained in books. It is the consciousness that there is an underlying order, an unbreakable truth that flows through everything, from the movement of the planets to the beating of our own heart. Cosmic wisdom is the art of listening to that truth and living in harmony with it. I remember a time when I was facing a difficult decision. Logic pushed me in one direction, while my intuition, that quiet voice within me, insisted on the opposite. It was a moment of internal struggle, a confrontation between what seemed to be the safest option and what I knew deep in my being was the right thing to do. For once, I decided to trust that intuition completely, and as I did, I felt a peace I had never experienced before. It was as if I had aligned myself with an invisible but powerful current, one that guided me toward my purpose. How can we act in harmony with the truth? I asked myself, still trying to understand this experience. Truth is not something we should impose or chase, but something we must allow to emerge within us. Truth is like an underground river. It flows, deep within our being, waiting for us to open ourselves to its course. And how do we know? What is the truth, you might ask? Knowing the truth isn't a matter of logic, but of connection. It's a silent certainty that's felt beyond words, a clarity that arises when we're in tune with life. It's not something that can be easily proven or explained, but something that is experienced and lived. Acting in harmony with truth. Acting in harmony with the truth is choosing love over fear, authenticity over convenience, and compassion over judgment. One day, while watching the sunrise, I realized that the sun doesn't need to try to light the world. It simply shines. It doesn't try to be anything other than what it is, and in that authenticity lies its power. In that moment, I understood that acting in harmony with the truth doesn't mean being perfect, but being authentic, living faithful to our deepest essence. Why is it sometimes so hard for us to act from the truth? I asked myself. The answer became clear over time. Because the truth often leads us down less traveled paths, down roads that demand courage and vulnerability. It's easier to go with the flow of others' opinions, or to give in to external expectations. But cosmic wisdom invites us to something deeper, to live from our authenticity. What happens when we act in harmony with the truth? I asked myself repeatedly. The answer is revealed in the peace we feel from knowing we've been true to ourselves, in the confidence that even if the path seems uncertain, we are being guided by something bigger than our limited mind. Life begins to flow more naturally, as if an invisible force were paving the way ahead of us. I remember a specific moment when, after making a difficult decision, I sat in silence and listened to my own heart. I expected to feel regret or doubt, but instead, I found a sense of relief, as if I had finally let go of a weight I had been carrying on my shoulders. In that moment, I understood that the truth never weighs us down, only the resistance to it does. How can we access this cosmic wisdom? Is a question many people ask. Cosmic wisdom isn't accessed through force or intellect, but through stillness and openness. It's learning to listen to the soul's whisper in the midst of the world's noise, to trust that even if we don't always see the full path, the truth will always show us the next step. The truth is not rigid or absolute. It's flexible and alive, like a tree that bends in the wind but doesn't lose its roots. How do I know if I'm acting from the truth? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. You know it when, upon acting, you feel a deep peace, a certainty that even if the results aren't what you expected, you have been true to yourself and to life. In the following chapters, we will explore how to stay in tune with this wisdom, how to free ourselves from the illusions that lead us away from the truth, and how to live each day from a place of authenticity and love. Because in the end, cosmic wisdom isn't about knowing everything, but about living from the heart, trusting that life itself will guide us. Wealth as an expression of unity. On one occasion, while walking through a golden field at sunset, I felt the immensity of the landscape as a reflection of the abundance that exists in the world. It was as if nature itself whispered a truth to me that had been there all along. Wealth is not a collection of goods or possessions, but a manifestation of the unity that exists in all creation. What is true wealth? I asked myself as I watched. The sun's rays bathe the fields, filling everything with light. True wealth, I discovered, is not measured in coins or properties. It is measured in the fullness of being conscious of our connection with everything that exists. It is a state of being in which we understand that we are not isolated individuals, but parts of a larger and more perfect whole. I remember a key moment in my life when economic difficulties threatened to drown my spirit. I felt lost, overwhelmed by worry and fear. It was then that, upon observing a solitary tree in the middle of that golden field, I realized something fundamental. The tree doesn't worry about accumulating more leaves or competing with other trees. It simply stands firm, in its roots, knowing that it is part of a larger ecosystem that nourishes and sustains it. How can we experience wealth as an expression of unity? I asked myself in that moment. The answer came from a simple truth. We experience true wealth when we realize that we are inextricably connected to the source of all life, when we understand that abundance is not something we possess but something we share, something that flows through us like the water of a river. And what does it mean to share that abundance, you might ask? Sharing abundance is not simply giving others what we have left over, but recognizing that what we give enriches us as much as what we receive. It is acting from the certainty that everything we need is already available to us, and that by sharing our wealth, we open ourselves to receiving more than we could imagine. One day, listening to the birds sing, I understood that wealth is not about possession, but about participation. Birds don't accumulate treasures. They simply sing, sharing their song with the world. In that act of sharing, they are manifesting their unity with everything around them. Wealth, I thought, is exactly that. A constant flow of giving and receiving, an eternal cycle that feeds itself. Why do we sometimes experience scarcity? I asked myself. Scarcity, I discovered, is an illusion that arises when we forget our connection with unity. It arises when we see others as competitors instead of companions, when we perceive life as a struggle instead of a flow. But by remembering that we are part of a larger whole, scarcity dissolves and abundance is revealed. How can we live from this consciousness of unity and wealth? I constantly asked myself. The key, I understood, is to recognize wealth in all its forms, not just in the material. Wealth is the laughter of a child, the hug of a friend, the beauty of a sunset. It is allowing ourselves to see life not as something we must conquer, but as a gift that has been given to us to enjoy and share. On a quiet afternoon, as the sun set on the horizon, I felt a deep gratitude for everything I had, not just for the tangible, but for every moment of connection and love I had experienced. I understood that wealth is not accumulated. It is expressed, and that expression is born from our consciousness of unity, from our understanding that everything we give to the world, we are actually giving to ourselves. And what is the purpose of wealth? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose of wealth is not to accumulate power or possessions, but to manifest the abundance of life in every action, in every word, in every thought. It is to live from the certainty that there is enough for everyone, and that by sharing our wealth, we contribute to the expansion of unity in the world. In the following chapters, we will explore how to live from this consciousness of unity and abundance, how to release the beliefs that keep us tied to scarcity, and how to manifest true wealth in every aspect of our lives. Because in the end, wealth is not something that is possessed, but something that is lived and expressed. One mind, one life, the connection to the eternal on the most serene nights, when all the noise fades and only silence remains. I often look up at the starry sky and feel a deep connection with something immense, eternal. In those moments, a question arises that resonates in the depths of my being. Is there a mind beyond my own, one that encompasses everything? And if so, how can I unite with it? What does it mean to have a mind and a life connected to the eternal? I asked myself as the echo of my thoughts was lost in the vastness of the universe. Over time, I discovered that we are not just a separate body living individual experiences. We are manifestations of the same consciousness, expressions of an eternal mind that underlies everything that exists. The connection to the eternal is not an act of will, but of recognition. An awakening to the truth that we have always been part of an infinite whole. I remember a particular day when everything seemed to be falling apart around me. Difficulties overwhelmed me, and my mind was filled with fears and doubts. I felt trapped, as if my life were disconnected from everything good and true. It was then, in the midst of my despair, that I decided to stop and listen. To listen not with my ears, but with my heart. In that instant of silence, I felt something incredible. A deep peace, a silent certainty that everything I was experiencing was part of a greater plan, of a mind that encompassed everything. How can we connect our mind to the eternal? I asked myself. The answer, I discovered, is not found in books or external teachings. It is found in stillness, in the ability to listen to what has always been there. Connecting with the eternal is letting go of the need to control and allowing life to flow through us, just as the river flows toward the ocean. It is accepting that we are much more than our thoughts, our fears, or our worries. We are an extension of the same consciousness that holds the stars in the sky. How do I know if I am connected to the eternal? It is a natural question, and the answer is revealed in the experience itself. You know it when, despite the challenges, you feel a deep peace, a certainty that you are not alone on your path. You know it when your actions are no longer motivated by fear but by love, when your thoughts arise from a place of trust instead of doubt. One day, while walking on a path surrounded by tall trees, I felt a deep connection with every leaf, every branch, every particle of air. It was as if my mind had expanded beyond my body, uniting with everything around me. It was in that moment that I understood a simple and powerful truth. A mind connected to the eternal is a mind that recognizes unity in all things. Why do we sometimes feel disconnected? I asked myself. Disconnection arises when we identify only with our thoughts and emotions, when we believe ourselves to be separate from the whole. But in reality, we have always been part of that eternal mind, of that consciousness that unites us all. Disconnection is just an illusion created by the limited mind, and by letting go of that illusion, we return to our true nature. And how can we live from this connection, you might ask? Living from the connection to the eternal does not mean ceasing to be human or denying our experiences, but integrating them into a broader vision. It is understanding that every thought, every action, and every experience is a manifestation of that infinite mind. Living from this connection is acting from compassion, love, and truth, knowing that everything we do has an impact on the whole. In a moment of deep meditation, I felt my mind uniting with the current of life itself, and I understood something fundamental. A mind connected to the eternal does not seek control, but collaboration. It is like the wind that blows gently, guiding the leaves without imposing its will. This is how we should live, in harmony with life, but allowing our mind to align with the eternal truth. And what is the purpose of connecting with the eternal? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose is not to escape our humanity, but to embrace it fully from a broader consciousness. It is to live with the certainty that even though our lives are brief on the scale of time, we are connected to something that has no beginning or end. It is to find meaning in every moment, in every encounter, in every breath. In the following chapters, we will explore how to maintain this connection in the midst of difficulties, how to live from a consciousness of unity, and how to manifest the eternal truth in our daily actions. Because in the end, a mind connected to the eternal is not a perfect mind, but a mind at peace with life. The power of affirmation. Truth in our words. In my walk through life, there was a key moment when I realized that the words we utter are not just mere vibrations that vanish into the air, but seeds that we plant in the garden of our mind and the universe. It was a simple but profound revelation that forever changed the way I spoke, thought, and ultimately lived. What is an affirmation? I asked myself while walking on a path surrounded by trees. An affirmation is not simply a positive phrase, repeated without meaning. It is a declaration of truth, an act of conscious creation that shapes our reality. The words we utter carry an energy, and that energy has the power to build or destroy, to nourish or strip away. I remember a specific day when I was immersed in a state of doubt and uncertainty. My thoughts had become a torrent of negativity and fear, and every word that came out of my mouth reflected that internal storm. It was then, almost in an act of desperation, that I decided to stop and change my words. I stood in front of a mirror and said aloud, "I am at peace. I am strong. I am connected with life." At first, my own words sounded empty, like a meaningless echo, but something inside me told me to continue. How can words have so much power? I asked myself. The answer became clear over time. Words are the way we give form to our thoughts, and through them, we influence the energy that surrounds us. Every affirmation is like an order we give to the universe, an instruction that directs the creation of our experience. When our words are aligned with the truth, they become vehicles of power capable of transforming reality in our favor. And what does it mean to align our words with the truth, you might ask? Aligning our words with the truth is not about saying what we want to believe, but about declaring what is already true at the deepest level of our consciousness. It is recognizing our connection to the source of all life and speaking from that unshakable certainty. It is understanding that by affirming the truth, we are not lying about our situation, but choosing to see beyond temporary appearances. One day, while watching the sunrise from the shore of a lake, I realized that nature does not hesitate to express its truth. The sun doesn't ask itself if it should rise, it simply does. The water doesn't hesitate if it should flow, it simply follows its course. In that moment, I understood that affirmation is a way of aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life, of ceasing to resist and beginning to flow with the truth that is already within us. Why do we sometimes doubt the power of our words? I ask myself. Doubt arises when we disconnect from our essence, when we forget that we are co-creators of our experience. But the truth is that every word we utter carries a vibration, and that vibration affects not only our mind, but also the world around us. Speaking from the truth is not just an act of faith, but an act of conscious creation. And how can I use the power of affirmation, you may ask? The power of affirmation manifests when we choose our words with intention, when we decide to speak from a place of love, trust, and certainty. It is not about denying difficulties, but about affirming our ability to overcome them. It is not about ignoring pain, but about affirming our ability to heal it. On a quiet afternoon, while reflecting by a river, I decided to do an experiment. I sat down and began to affirm in a low voice, "I am abundant. I am at peace. Everything is well." As I repeated these words, something inside me began to change. It was not just the act of speaking, but the energy behind my words that was transforming my internal state. I realized that every affirmation was not only shaping my reality, but also my perception of it. What is the purpose of affirming the truth? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose of affirmation is not simply to get what we want, but to remember who we truly are. It is a way of anchoring our consciousness in the eternal truth, of aligning our words with our deepest essence. It is a tool to transform our mind, our body, and our life. In the following chapters, we will explore how to maintain this practice of conscious affirmation, how to free ourselves from the words that limit us, and how to allow the truth to flow through every thought and action. Because in the end, the power of affirmation is not found in the words themselves, but in the intention and truth they carry with them. Inner transformation, from a consciousness of scarcity to abundance. There was a time in my life when scarcity was my constant reality. I don't mean just the lack of money or possessions, but a deeper scarcity, a persistent feeling that there would never be enough time, enough love, enough opportunities, enough life itself. It was as if my mind were trapped in a desert, unable to see the rivers of abundance that flowed just beyond the horizon. What is a consciousness of scarcity? I asked myself as I struggled with my thoughts on the quietest nights. A consciousness of scarcity is not just a perception of material lack. It is a way of seeing life, a filter through which everything seems limited and distant. It is a belief rooted deep in our mind, a constant fear of losing the little we believe we have. I remember a specific moment when I found myself observing how other people seemed to flourish in the midst of circumstances that seemed impossible to me. I saw them find opportunities, overcome obstacles, and live with a peace that I couldn't achieve. It was then that I realized that true transformation was not about changing external circumstances, but about changing my way of seeing them. I understood that it was not life that was limiting me, but my own mind. How can I transform my consciousness? I asked myself. The answer, I discovered, was in a radical change of perspective, to stop focusing on what I was missing and to start seeing what was already present in my life. Inner transformation toward abundance begins when we stop looking at the world with eyes of lack and start seeing it with eyes of gratitude. And what does it mean to live in abundance, you might ask? Living in abundance is not just about having material wealth, but about experiencing a deep trust in life, a certainty that there is always enough for every moment. It is understanding that abundance is not something you chase, but something that is revealed when we change our way of thinking. One morning, while walking through a dew-covered meadow, I stopped and watched as the water droplets glistened in the sunlight. It was in that instant that something inside me changed. I saw that every drop was an expression of abundance, a manifestation of the fullness of life. I realized that just like nature, I could also flow with life instead of fighting against it. Why do we sometimes feel trapped in scarcity? I asked myself. The answer arose with clarity. We feel trapped in scarcity when we identify with our limitations, when we allow fear and doubt to define our perception. But scarcity is just an illusion created by the mind, and by letting go of that illusion, we can open ourselves to the truth of abundance that has always been present. And how can we live from this truth of abundance, you may ask? The key is to cultivate a mindset of gratitude, to recognize the small blessings of each day, and to allow that gratitude to become the starting point of our life. It is choosing opportunities instead of obstacles, possibilities instead of limitations. Abundance, I discovered, is not something you get. It is something you choose. One day, while reflecting by a river, I understood something fundamental. Abundance is not a place we arrive at, but a state of being that we cultivate. It is not about filling a void with external things, but about recognizing that we are already complete, that everything we need to live a full life is already within us. And what is the purpose of this transformation? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose is not simply to improve our circumstances, but to live from a perspective of trust and fullness. It is to free our mind from the chains of scarcity and allow ourselves to experience life in all its richness and beauty. It is to share that abundance with others, knowing that by doing so, we multiply it. In the following chapters, we will explore how to maintain this mindset of abundance, how to overcome the beliefs that limit us, and how to allow life to flow through us in unexpected ways. Because in the end, inner transformation is not a superficial change, but a deep metamorphosis of the way we are and the way we see life, because when we transform our consciousness from scarcity to abundance, we discover that life itself is a gift, and in that gratitude, we find the peace and purpose we have always sought. Life in fullness, walking in the light of universal love, in the quietest moments. When everything else dissipates and only the serenity of the present remains, I often ask myself, what does it mean to live fully? Not just to exist, but to live with an open heart, walking in the light of something bigger than oneself. It was a question that led me down many paths, and every step I took brought me closer to a profound and liberating understanding. Living in fullness is walking in the light of universal love. What is universal love? I asked myself, not as an abstract idea, but as a real, tangible experience. Universal love, I discovered, is not a fleeting feeling or a conditioned emotion. It is a force that encompasses everything, that sustains every being, every atom, every moment. It is the energy that gives life to everything that exists, and that in some way also lives in us. I remember a time when, facing a period of darkness and confusion, I felt as if everything around me was falling apart. It was as if a dark cloud enveloped me, blocking the light and warmth of life. It was in the midst of that internal night that I decided to open myself to something greater than my own pain. I had no certainty of what I would find, but I surrendered. In that surrender, something changed. I felt a deep, immense love that did not come from outside, but from within myself, as if it had always been there, waiting to be recognized. How can we experience this universal love? I asked myself. The experience of this love is not something you seek or force. It is something you allow. It is opening our heart and allowing the love that has always been there to flow through us. It is ceasing to see ourselves as separate beings and beginning to recognize ourselves as part of a larger whole, more vast and more beautiful than we can understand. And how can we live in the light of this love? You might ask. Living in the light of universal love does not mean ignoring our wounds or denying our shadows, but embracing them with compassion and understanding. It is allowing love to illuminate every corner of our being, even those that seem darkest to us. It is seeing ourselves and others with eyes of love instead of eyes of judgment. One afternoon, while watching the sunset over a serene lake, I felt a deep connection with everything around me. It was as if the sun, the lake, the wind, and I were part of the same melody, different notes in an eternal symphony. I understood that living in fullness is not about having more or being more, but about recognizing the perfection of every moment just as it is. It is walking in the light of love, not because there is no darkness, but because love allows us to see beyond it. Why do we sometimes feel disconnected from this love? I asked myself. Disconnection, I discovered, occurs when we identify with our limitations and forget our true nature. We disconnect when we allow fear and guilt to come between us and life. But universal love is always there, waiting patiently for us to open the eyes of our soul to see it. How can we walk in this light every day, you may ask? Walking in the light of universal love does not mean not facing challenges or difficulties, but facing them with an open and trusting heart. It is choosing love over fear, compassion over judgment, and faith over doubt. It is living with gratitude for every moment, seeing every experience, good or bad, as an opportunity to love more, deeply. On one occasion, while listening to the sound of the rain falling gently on the leaves, I understood that life in fullness is not a destination we reach, but a state of consciousness that we choose to cultivate. It is walking through life with an open and receptive disposition, allowing universal love to guide us, sustain us, and express itself through us. And what is the purpose of living in fullness? You can ask yourself at the end of this chapter. The purpose of living in fullness is not to achieve perfection, but to experience the totality of life with its lights and its shadows, with its joys and its sorrows. It is to live from a place of authenticity and connection, being a channel for universal love in every thought, word, and action. In the following chapters, we will explore how to stay in this light, how to transcend the barriers that keep us from love, and how to manifest fullness in every aspect of our existence. Because in the end, life in fullness is not about what we have, but about how we love and how we allow that love to flow through us to the world. Because when we walk in the light of universal love, we discover that life itself is an act of love, and in that love, we find the peace and fullness we have always sought. If this audiobook has inspired you, imagine what you can discover with many more. Don't let knowledge and spiritual growth stop here. Explore our complete playlist and immerse yourself in more transformative wisdom. And if you truly want to elevate your life from different points of view on spirituality, I invite you to visit my channel, Chronicle of Knowledge, where you will find in-depth spiritual content to continue expanding your mind and your being. Don't miss the opportunity to continue transforming your reality. Take the next step now. Thank you very much.